Hi, my name is Mike Gonzalez, and I did my PowerPoint over diabetes, more specifically type 2 diabetes. I'm going to start off by talking about how people without type 2 diabetes process their glucose. So, normally everybody eats. It's after you eat that you get high glucose blood levels, which again is normal because your body needs food, carbohydrates, glucose, which glucose is the main source of energy for our body to help it move, just bodily functions. Um, so what happens is that when you have elevated glucose blood levels, your pancreas gets signaled to release insulin, and what the insulin does is it binds to the cells and helps regulate and direct where the glucose should go. Normally, your glucose blood level should be from 80 to 120 milligrams deciliters. And that's how it should be processed. For diabetes, for type 2, I went ahead and just wrote a general definition for diabetes, not specific to type 2, but to diabetes as a whole. And I basically put that diabetes is elevated blood glucose levels due to the disruption or process of making insulin. And type 2 diabetes has to deal with not the making of it, but the process of insulin to the cells. I'm going to go ahead and say that diabetes is not an infectious disease, it's a chronic disease, because if it were to be infectious, it would require a microorganism infecting you, which this has no relevance to. So, in type 2 diabetes, what happens in their body is that when they eat, they get elevated blood glucose levels, and that's normal. Their pancreas releases insulin, which is normal. It's when the insulin tries to bond with the cells. The cells become more resistant to insulin. Therefore, your body's not able to fully process all of that glucose, and it ends up becoming stored fat or something like that. And so the basic concept of type 2 is that your cells become insulin resistant. They don't completely stop taking insulin, they just don't take in as much as they used to. Next, I'm going to talk about the symptoms and effects that type 2 diabetes can have on you. The first one's going to be frequent urination. You can also have extreme thirst, fatigue, you can have heart problems, clogged arteries, depression, and so on and so forth. It really all kind of ties in together once we start talking about it and go more into the PowerPoint, as you'll see. So, we're going to talk about the types of correlations with type 2 diabetes and lifestyle. So, one thing I found for sure that it directly correlates with being overweight and obese. I'm not saying that everybody who has type 2 diabetes is overweight or obese, but the majority of people who are overweight or obese do have type 2 diabetes. And it's no coincidence that they also found that lack of physical activity is tied in to a correlation with type 2 diabetes. If you have lack of physical activity, you're going to become obese. And as we said, the effects of type 2, you can get depressed. People usually self-image. They might start feeling bad about themselves. And as you can see, it all ties in. Some other things I found out is that minorities also have escalated risk of getting type 2 diabetes. That means African Americans, Mexicans, Asians all have a higher chance of getting type 2 diabetes than other majorities. Another one I found was hypertension. Hypertension is when your heart pumps too fast, and it ends up making the walls of your heart get thicker and thicker, and it gets harder and harder to pump the blood. And eventually, at one point, it'll become so tough that it's gonna stop pumping because it's just a big bulk of muscle. I also found that type 2 diabetes can be genetic. It can be passed down from your family. So if your parents are known to have it, or your grandparents are known to have it, you might want to watch out. Another thing I found was diet. And that ties in with physical activities and being overweight and obese. About diet specifically, if you have diets that are high in saturated fat and low in fiber, you have an increased risk of getting type 2 diabetes. I also found that as you increase in age, typically middle age around 22, that are obese have diabetes. And as you get older and older, that risk only goes higher and higher because your body doesn't work as it used to as when you were younger. Next, I'm going to talk about treatment. Unfortunately, I did not find any type of cure for type 2 diabetes, but they do have a lot of treatments and remedies to help regulate it. The first one and top one being you can get an insulin shot. I think they usually take it after meals or a couple every hours. I didn't really look into it, but I know that that's a big one for people with type 2 diabetes. You can also watch your diet. In fact, I read that there are certain things you can eat, like white kidney beans and brown seaweed extracts, that can help regulate your carbohydrates to take the ease off your pancreas and everything. You can exercise. Exercises can help burn that energy a lot faster than just sleeping or sitting, as you know. And then good health practices, which again pretty much sums everything up that is on here. So the three main points I want to get across, and the kind of sum up of my whole PowerPoint, is that type 2 is a chronic disease. It is not infectious at all. Type 2 deals with the cells becoming resistant to insulin because of the constant high levels of blood glucose in your pancreas working overtime and getting tired. And type 2 diabetes has a direct correlation with being overweight and obese, lack of physical activity, your diet, and pretty much your lifestyle as a whole too. I went ahead and wrote some fun facts on here for us. Some things that I learned while I was researching diabetes type 2. So the first one is that diabetes is the #1 most common endocrine and metabolic disorder in the system. And another thing I found was that the 7th leading cause of death is caused from diabetes. That 26 million people have type 2 diabetes, and another 79 million are at high risk of getting type 2 diabetes. And the last one is type 2 makes up 90 to 95% of all diabetic cases that were found, which is quite a lot, and that's just a lot. Here's my citations, and that's all I have. Thank you for watching.